Hey everybody, this is TCG Productions here. Today is January 4th, 2026. So this would be just about the first actual full video of the new year. Now my previous video where I installed IBM OS 2 on the 1993 Gateway 208046 system, the tail end of that video was recorded after the new year, but the majority of that video was not. The majority of that video was recorded during the last week of 2025. So this is the first complete video to be recorded in the new year. So hope everybody's new year went well and everything. And well, welcome to 2026. Here we are. So today in this video, or well tonight because it's just after 9 o'clock, we are going to be taking a detailed overview and look at a Packard Bell PackMate 5996CDT personal computer system. This here, a friend of an instructor that I work with gave this and a couple of other systems to me that were far less interesting. This Packard Bell is definitely the most interesting of the three systems that found their way to me. Now, this system does not have a hard drive in it. The system's hard drive was pulled because the previous owner, the first owner more than likely, an elderly person, he wanted to make sure that he had all of the files and everything copied off of the hard drives that came out of these three systems. So I don't have the hard drives to any of these systems, and he said that he would return the drives once he verified that everything was copied off of them. But chances are the drives are probably just going to sit. Basically what happened is a friend of this instructor that I work with on a regular basis, he wanted the files copied off of these computers, and due to the age of these systems it was easier to pull the drives out of the computers and instead connect them to a more modern system. Now, the approach that they had initially started out with was to pull the drives and connect them to commonly available USB to IDE adapters, and then plug those into more modern systems. However, the hard drive from this Packard Bell that you see almost out of view of the camera sitting behind me was a pretty old hard drive, because this system I think is from like 1994 or 1995, somewhere around there. I'm not entirely sure. We'll find out for sure whenever we open the system up and we look at the date codes at the various pieces of hardware inside the machine. Anyways, the hard drive was rather old, and old IDE hard drives do not play nice at all with these USB to IDE adapters you can find for a dime a dozen pretty much anywhere. So what I ended up doing is I ended up piecing a system back together that had been previously disassembled as part of a class exercise, rather extensively at that. And I even had to unbend some of the pins in the processor that system has, an AMD, I think, AM2 or FM2, no, I don't think it was FM2, I think it was AM2 or something like that. Anyway, socket 939, or whatever came after socket 939, had to unbend some pins on that processor because the system was not disassembled with too much of a great deal of care. But I found all the parts and pieces of the system relatively quickly and got the system put back together and back up and running, because that particular system has a true hardware IDE controller that I can make use of. And so that's exactly what I did. I connected the hard drive out of this system to that computer with its hardware IDE controller, and the drive was detected and recognized immediately. I booted to a copy of Kdenlive from a USB thumbstick or a USB flash drive, depending on how you want to call them, and I was able to not only copy all of the files off of this hard drive for the friend of this instructor, but I was also able to use Kdenlive and take a complete disk image of the contents of that drive. So the contents of that drive were safely copied to more modern storage media that could be safely backed up on a regular basis. So that aside and everything, that's pretty much how the system found its way to me. And the system sat in a classroom for quite some time. Then it sat in my office, And then I got tired of looking at the things sitting in my office, and so what did I do? I found some spare time, loaded this thing up into my car, and took this thing here home, and then it sat some more. You kind of get the theme here, system sitting around for a while. I think I acquired this system back in April or May, and it is now January. And so it's been 8 or 9 months since I've acquired this system, and the only time I cracked the case open on this was to extract the hard drive out of this system. That's the only time I've been in the computer. I have not powered the system up. I cannot remember if the previous owner had this thing powered up or not, but I am going to treat this system as being of unknown origin from unknown provenance, and I will handle the system accordingly. Now, I have physically been in the computer just to extract the drive, and that's about it. So unless something has quite literally crawled in here and died over the past 9 months, I don't think we're going to see much of a shock whenever we open the case up. But we'll see some of my special handling later whenever we get to actually powering the system up, because I do care about the system. Now, if I didn't care about the system and if it went boom, I'd already consider it to be worth the value. I'd already consider the value of that to be worth what I expended to get the system. Then we'd just be plugging the thing in, powering it up, and seeing what happens. So, anyways, as we can see, the workbench is operating in mostly the same configuration as it was from my previous video, except Theseus is no longer up on the workbench after I lugged it back up there while wrangling hard drives from the from the OS2 project. Theseus has been returned to its normal configuration and is resting down there. It's not hooked up to anything. And I still have my cheap and nasty little HP monitor that looks about as good as a dog turd rotting in hot sunlight. I know, a bit of an image there, but this monitor, let's just put it this way. If I put no offense to anybody out there who likes Ford Motor Company's vehicles, but let's just put it this way. If I put a Ford logo on this monitor, the thing would quite literally turn into a vacuum cleaner because it already sucks that much by default. It almost makes color pictures look black and white. So, anyways, here we have the system in question, the Packard Bell PackMate 5996CDT. And here it is in all of its very yellowed glory. This system definitely spent some time in the sun. Now the camera is not making it look as bad as it actually is, just because probably a combination of exposure and white balancing. But if I tilt the system up, yeah, it's pretty yellowed, especially if I take this and contrast it with something such as that custom-built system sitting down there, or the metal outer case on that compact workstation, which is going to be the target of another future video. Maybe that little custom-built system there. So, but yeah. Just a quick overview of things here on the front panel. Obviously, we're going to have the Packard Bell logo up there. It says we have a quad-speed CD-ROM, and you'll notice the sticker's not even applied level on the front of the drive here. Of course, it could be from the factory because they were just trying to cram as many of these things out the door as they could, or it could be that the sticker is shifted over time, given that it's Packard Bell from 1994, 1995 or thereabouts. I would be willing to guess that the sticker was just simply not put on correctly at the factory. And again, it's a standard compact disc drive, probably a CD reader only. We have a headphone out on the front. We have a volume control for that headphone out. We have a indicator light here to indicate when the drive is busy. We have the emergency eject hole, which I have not poked to see if I get a free disc. And then we have the ejection button where the actual fascia button itself has slipped off. However, the little push button in there is still very much in place and intact. And then below that we have a 3.5 inch. We have a 3.5 inch. I'm going to assume it's a 1.44 megabyte floppy diskette drive. I think I might have just slipped the diskette in there just to see if it does anything interesting at all in the slightest. We'll see if the mechanism operates properly. Here we have a diskette that I've written some IBM XDF tools onto for handling IBM XDF formatted diskettes. Yeah, it works. It's a bit sluggish to load and eject diskettes. They need greased. And then down here we have, a little brag sticker. We have a 100 megahertz Pentium processor, so that'd be the original Pentium. Could be affected by FDIV. We'll probably see in a part 2 or continuation to this video. Because again, this system does not have a hard drive in it, but we will be adding one of those. We can see that it originally had a 1.08 gigabyte, 1080 megabyte hard disk. And I don't know if that's just raw capacity or if that's formatted capacity. If it's raw capacity, I imagine that was probably down to about 800 or 900 megabytes formatted. 16 megs of RAM, so definitely not bad for the era. Upgradable to 128, which is actually pretty nice. They didn't cut the corner too hard in that. They definitely didn't cut the corners too bad, at least what we've seen so far. 14.4K combination fax modem and sound card. We'll get to that in a bit. And then they go on to append and mouse to the end of that. You kind of need a mouse to operate a graphical operating environment. It's just kind of been standard. That was definitely standard equipment. Standard equipment. I cannot pronounce things tonight. We have a quad-speed CD-ROM drive, multi-session. So I think the multi-session thing is more of a software side of things. The drive hardware is going to support it regardless. So maybe it is a rewritable drive. Not sure. We'll have a look at that in a bit. Kodak Photo CD and XA compatible, 600. Now you see here they list it as kilobytes per second, big K, big B, and you'll notice that they did the same on the label as well. So it could be 600 kilobytes per second. Could also be 600 kilobits per second. Probably bytes if I had to guess. Apparently this system came with a Packard Bell color monitor, which I did not get with this system. 16-bit SRS 3D amphitheater stereo sound. Yeah, they're just bragging out their hole about that. With integrated speakers. Basically, it's two stereo. Basically, what it is it's two stereo speakers, one mounted on each side of the monitor. That's about it. I'll splice a photo of one of those. Monitors in here if I remember to. And then, if we move over to the other side. The graphics card, the graphics hardware on the motherboard has a megabyte of video memory already built in, and it didn't recall, it hasn't stated what the video hardware is. It could be something competent like ATI or NVIDIA graphics. Could also be not exact. I'm not going to call it an off-brand, but definitely not ATI or NVIDIA. It could be something like that. And as UXW Bill has mentioned in one of his videos, I think over a very similar system, it could also be one of those chromatic research things. Now, I have not had personal experience with a chromatic research video chipset, but from what I heard in that particular video, which I'll link down in the description if I remember to. If I haven't, please let me know in the comments. And I'll definitely link it in the description. Those were not very good video chipsets. So hopefully, knock on wood, we will not hopefully, knock on wood, we will not be gaining experience with those today. And we have a telephone answering system, music on hold, call monitoring and screening, speed dial, recording phone conversations. 99% of that is software. Basically, the only thing that's actually important here is the fact that it can answer your phone calls for you. So, and then we have PCI PCI local bus video. I almost thought that was VLB or ISA VLB, and it could be. Obviously, going by the label here, the system is going to have a PCI expansion bus. PCI expansion bus in it, but it could also have internal ISA VLB on the system board as well. I will be thoroughly unimpressed if that is actually the case. It could also be that that we are dealing with proper PCI integrated video and IDE controller hardware. MPC Level 2 multimedia specifications. I haven't looked that up, so feel free to look that up and tell me all about it in the comments. And then we have then some bragging about some of the pack-in software that this thing would have originally come bundled with. Packard Bell Navigator, virtual remote control, plus a popular selection of software titles. So maybe I'll try to see if I can find the original master CDs for this thing. If so, I will definitely give restoring the original software to this thing a try. I make no guarantees that it will be any at all successful though. And then we have the label down here, all its glory, PackMate 5996CDT. Now, these Packard Bell systems, apparently you could get two varieties of any Packard Bell system. The first variety is whenever a particular system had just been sent to production and the first production runs were coming off the assembly line. These systems were fitted at the component level with the hardware originally specified in the original bill of materials put together by the hardware engineering teams, and these systems would be fairly reliable. Stable, and upgradable without too much of a fuss. And then later revisions of those same systems, they would start trying to cheap out on the systems and save a few pennies here and there by specifying hardware other than what the engineers originally spec'd out in the original bill of materials. These systems were okay in their factory shipped configurations, but if you went beyond, if you started upgrading the system and adding expansion cards and whatnot, from what I've heard, these things got to, some of these systems, the later ones, where they started messing around with the bill of materials, when you started upgrading these, they got to be all kinds of unstable and unpredictable and chaotic. So yeah, there's two varieties. I have no idea which one this is going to be. Given how it's a 100 megahertz Pentium processor, if this is from 1995, then we could have the former variant of this system, the one that's all nice and stable and everything. If it is a 1996 or 1997 built system, then it is probably the latter variant of this system, the one where they had started messing around with the bill of materials to try to cheap out on the build, save a few pennies here and there, and serious upgrades to this system will probably be met with, shall we say, clearly displayed reluctance from the system hardware. So, these systems open up in a rather unique way, and again, I learned this from another video that UXW Bill has done on these systems. These systems open, there are 4 screws on the bottom of the case here that serves to hold the side panel on, and I will go ahead and slide this thing around, spin this thing around so that way we can take the correct side of the case off. And yeah, and so there's 4 screws. There's one here, one here, one here, and one here that serves to hold the side cover onto the system. So what you have to do is obviously you have to turn the system either sideways or upside down, and then undo these 4 screws that hold the side cover on. If you're able, you might be able to see here that this system, that the rubber feet on this system have moved around a bit, probably because this system spent most of its life on either some fairly grippy carpet or a tile floor of some kind, and was shifted around over the years a number of times, and the rubber feet have just kind of moved around as time has gone on. So with those 4 screws removed, getting into this system should be about as simple as you may have to move the rubber feet if it is still possible to do so. Otherwise, you might have to get creative with how you cajole this thing open. So in this case, I'm going to take a flathead screwdriver, kind of break the seal between that particular rubber foot and the case, and then slot that thing in there. I think the side of this might lift up, might not. I had some level of difficulty getting into this thing originally 9 months ago whenever I pulled the hard drive out of here. So let's see. And I've just gone and misplaced my flathead screw. There it is. There we go. That out of the way. I think, yep, there we go. It lifts up and comes away from the system. Okay, I can see we have 3 PCI slots and 3 ISA slots. So, but yeah, what you see right at the very front here, this would be the combination sound card and data fax voice modem thing. So from what I can tell here, it looks like it bases around a looks like the audio side of the system. Looks like the audio side of this thing is handled by a Crystal Sound chipset, and we have a Panasonic CR-5XA CD-ROM connector, which is currently not visible because I haven't taken the camera off the tripod. And I can already see on the system board we have a Cirrus Logic video chipset. So, Cirrus Logic video, and I'm going to go ahead, set the exposure back to auto, and then we'll start poking around the system. So in here we have not only our video subsystem but our video memory. So here we have our Cirrus Logic video chipset, and they're a well-known and respected brand from the era. And then here, these 2 chips here on the board, these are 512 kilobytes each, and these are hard soldered to the motherboard. This makes up the 1 megabyte of video memory pre-installed with the system. And then we have 2 upgrade sockets here where another 1 megabyte of video memory can be installed into the system. So definitely not a bad little system for the time. Not a Rocket Screamer Pentium Pro powerhouse or anything like that, but definitely not a badly equipped home computer. And then over here we can see part of an Intel chipset. Intel PCI set SB 82437FX from 1994. So that chip has a copyright of 1994 and Z966 or Z966. So is that 1996 possibly? We'll find out. And then over here we have the actually pretty anodized blue heatsink on top of our 100 megahertz Pentium processor. We might pop this off later, might not. And then And then down there we can see part of the system's installed memory. These are going to be 72-pin SIMs. And oh, that's strange. One of the SIMs is installed at a 45-degree angle relative to the system board, which is kind of odd. For a moment I thought maybe that SIM had fallen out of its socket, but no. You can't see it right now, so go ahead, adjust the tripod. And then we will begin taking a closer look at things. So here is our modem, and well, our combination of sound card and modem. We can see that there is an odd green PCB here that looks not unlike a Raspberry Pi Zero or an Arduino. It's definitely not that. And I'm not exactly sure what this is. This might be an upgrade component, but at the same time it looks to have been hard soldered to the motherboard. This could be an upgraded controller of some kind. It's definitely looks like something that got grafted on after the original board design was sent to production. As we can see here, we have an integrated circuit. It says copyright Rockwell 93, so that'd be a 1993 copyright from Rockwell. Rockwell Automation, I think, the same Rockwell that did the retro encabulator thing. So, and then we have a number of brightly colored relays. They almost look like, you know, safety vest orange. I imagine that given how these are placed right next to that transformer, Elitone, 53rd week of 1994, and then these relays here. These are probably for handling. These are probably for handling the phone line, and yeah, handling the phone line. It's curious that there's 3 of them here, even though there's only one phone jack on the end of the modem. And this is an ISA modem, ISA combination modem sound card. Now we'll get a closer look at that once we get it out of the system. So it looks like to further disassemble the system, we need to remove the modem, remove this brace here, and then we'll be able to set the system over on its side and remove the riser card, and then we'll be able to get a better look at a few things. And then we also need to get the hard disk cage out of the system. Now, fortunately, the hard drive cage does not require stupid proprietary rails that almost nobody has outside of probably someone who doesn't know what they have and it's just sitting in a storage room or a basement, or probably die-hard Packard Bell collectors or collectors of any particular computer or case or whatever it may be. So, anyways, to get this card out of the system, it's the usual ordeal. We've got our expansion slot blanks over here on this side of the system. It is curious to note that this card has what looks to be an anodized black expansion slot bracket here. So, put the screwdriver in there, back it out. And it looks like they're using slightly non-standard sized screws. Well, non-standard threaded screws, I should say. And then it is just a matter of, hopefully, just taking the card and pulling it out of the slot. Okay, it's loose there. I don't know what it is about these ISA slot cards, but we have a connector here that needs to be unplugged. probably going to the CD-ROM drive if I had to guess. And there we go, the card is out of the system. And the circuit board on the back has a silk screen date of 0495, so 4th week of 1995. So we'll set that upside down. And then I'll come around here and we'll all have a look at this. So we have a couple components here with Packard Bell stickers on them. Do not remove this label, void if tampered. They're obviously obscuring a couple of ICs here. And then we have another one of those stickers. We have the connector here for our Panasonic CD CR-5XX CD-ROM, so it's not CR-5XA, CR-5XX CD-ROM connector. So obviously the camera's lost focus. There we go. Probably a non-standard connector for a drive that cannot be connected directly to an IDE controller. And then here we have a couple of, here we have an 8-pin IC, a couple of crystal oscillators, 14.318, 12 kilohertz, 2 more crystal oscillators here, M24.5 EA, so it's at 24.5 megahertz. And then we have another one over here that's slightly obscured. See if I can clean that up real quick. And M16.9, so maybe 16.9 megahertz, probably clock signals for some of the various ICs, for some of the various integrated circuits here. So here we have a Crystal Sound CS4231A-KL, serial number dating it to the first week of 1995. So this would have been an early 1995 built system. And then we have, is that an AMD logo? Yes, that is. We have an AMD, what was that, PAL CE, with no obvious date code on it. Nope, 9450 DBA. That is our serial number. 9450 DBA. So, and then we have another IC. We have another IC here, just south of our Crystal Sound IC. Another Rockwell chip bearing a 1994 copyright, dated 3rd week of 1995. So this is probably an early 95 built modem sound card. And now we have explanations for the jumper blocks. Type of mic, condenser mic or carbon mic. So one of those would probably have phantom power turned onto that mic, and the other one disables phantom power. Base address, config mode, EEPROM or software, probably has to do with ISA plug and pray. And then this configures our COM port. So we're configuring, there's a lot of stuff on this card. And then we have a voltage regulator dated, let's see, W991D94, okay, 48th week of 1994. Here we have that green, almost add-on type looking board, 49th week of 1994. And we have our transform, and then we have all kinds of various connections. Line in, mic, line out, radio, TV audio, so that would be to support a television audio card, which this system never got. CD audio, which is what we unplugged. and CD audio 2 in case you had a second CD-ROM drive in here that you wanted to be able to have play audio into the system. Mic 1 and line out, another, so we have an internal line out header on the card. And then we have our modem connection here. Looks like we can, oh, there we go. So that's why there's 3 relays, because this can run, looks like this can support up to 3 phone lines, which definitely would have been an odd choice, but looks like the hardware is available on the card to support it. We have some, looks like possibly a Class X capacitor. We definitely have some capacitors on here, probably for surge protection, because if you know anything about phone lines and storms, well, storms like to produce lightning, and that lightning usually finds its way onto phone lines. And then we have a gain port on the back here. I'm going to assume, yeah, here we go, gain port. The legend here on the anodized black slot bracket says MIDI/gain. So combination MIDI port or gain port. We have our 3-line modem jack here. Obviously the camera has interests other than focusing on the thing pointed in front of it. Line out, mic, and line in. And then on the back here we have a pretty reflective PCB, and we can see the silk screening date of 04/95, so this would probably be January 1995 for sure. And then we have a couple different part numbers here, either that or a part number and a serial number. So that's a detailed overview. That's a detailed look at the modem. Definitely not at the whole computer though. Next thing I'll be doing is I'll turn the system on it. So I'll turn the system around and turn it on its side here. And then there is a brace here in the back that I'm going to be taking out so that way I can get the expansion card riser out of the system. There's a single screw on the end here that holds this thing in. So it's just a simple matter of putting a screwdriver in, backing that screw out, and then this, well, so it's not just a simple matter of, there we go, looks like this lifts up, and there we go, lifts up and then tilts out of the system like that. And it's got 2 more rubber feet on here to support the expansion slot riser in place. And you can see here where some of the pins from the slots have poked through into these rubber feet. Of course, whenever you're installing various cards in the system, you want that expansion slot riser to be supported so that way it does not break off inside the system and take the riser connector with it off the system board. So now that that bracket is out, I should be able to just pull up and unplug and remove the riser card from the system board, just like that. So here we go. Fairly simple here. We've got 3 ISA slots and 3 PCI slots, so we do have a fair bit of room for expansion in this system, as well as older hardware. So it looks like we can make decent use of this. As you can see here, we have what almost looks like an extended ISA card edge connector here. But we know it's definitely not that. And then the slot left behind on the system board also looks very similar. So now we have a lot easier access to the system board. And so the next thing I want to do is I want to get the hard drive cage out of the system. And yeah, we'll get the hard drive cage out of the system. And given the fact that this originally had a 1 gigabyte hard drive in it, that means this system's BIOS supports CHS translation, or translated CHS, or some form of drive translation logic, enabling me to use hard drives greater than 528 megabytes in the system. So I have an 850 megabyte hard drive, an 850 megabyte Maxtor hard drive that I think I'm going to install into the system. It's right here. I think this has been wiped. I'm not sure. I think I've wiped this, but we'll find out. So we'll set that over there. And to get the hard drive cage out, there's a screw right here that I took out. And let's see, what cajoling do you have to do to get this thing to come out? It looks like, yeah, it looks like you just pull this towards the bottom of the case and it just kind of pops out like that. Kind of crude, but definitely serviceable nonetheless. There's a nice ring to it. So that pops out and we get even more access to the system board. So I'll go ahead, pop the camera off the tripod, set that aside, and we'll have a look inside the computer here. Right down here we can see the system's clock battery, a CR2032. I have no idea if that thing is still good or not. And then we have the RAM. As we can see here, this is that SIM that I was talking about that was installed at a very weird angle relative to the other 3 sockets. I think this has been seen before. So I'll go ahead and pop that up and remove it. Looks like we have an SEC manufactured module. 507Y, looks like is a date code. Here we go, the 7th week of 1995. So this is definitely an early 1995 built system, which, given that processor, 100 megahertz Pentium, probably makes this the former category of systems. Here we can see a pretty sizable just blank area on the motherboard with no traces visible. And then we can see a couple wires going to the power switch. Looks like the power switch is only switching the line side of the power cable. We're not switching neutral. My Gateway 2000 system over there, the power switch on the front of that thing switches live and neutral. And then we can see a rather dusty power supply. We can also see, speaking of power, we can see our two AT power connectors there. And we can see that they are in fact correctly connected. Black to black, you're going to be back. Red to red, red to red, or red to any color. Motherboard dead. Yeah, black to black, you're going to be back. Red to red, motherboard dead. Some motherboards were designed such that they would just simply short circuit the power supply if you connected these incorrectly. Others would gladly pass all that power through and let the magic smoke out of everything, much to your dismay and possibly even sheer horror. We have a National Semiconductor part down here. We see IS 950, PC 87306. The focus just went to pieces there. What is that? IBA? Camera's having a very hard time focusing on that. IBA/VUL, whatever that happens to be, bears a 1994 copyright, and is date stamped the 6th week of 1995. And here we see what looks to be some sort of an auxiliary power connector. There is no silk screening explaining what it does on the motherboard. It is positioned directly above the expansion slot, the expansion card riser slot, so it could be additional power should it be needed, minus 5 volt power. If for some reason additional power was required. And speaking of the expansion card riser, it has a silk screening on here from the 43rd week of 1994. So, then down here we have probably a VESA feature connector. So if you had something like a TV tuner card or something like that installed on this motherboard, it would connect there. And then we can see all kinds of unused logic on the board for integrated sound hardware that obviously never made it to the production floor. Sections F, G, and H more than likely is where those would go. But we've got a lot of blank pads on the motherboard here where this hardware would have originally gone. And I can tell you it's sound because we have a connection for a modem speaker, microphone in, a jumper to configure whether it's a condenser or carbon mic, a special connector, probably if you had some kind of a tuner card. That almost looks like a scraped, broken, or burned trace on the motherboard. We have a wavetable upgrade socket, CD connector, radio, TV, a second CD connector. So yeah, obviously this is for where sound hardware would have gone on the motherboard. And that looks like, is that debris or is that a broken trace or a burned trace? Okay, that's just debris. I was worried that that trace had been exposed, possibly because something shorted and burned the top silkscreen layer off the board. And then we can get a better look at our Intel chipset. There's one component, and there's the other component. That would be our south bridge, and that would be our north bridge. And then we have another thing here on the motherboard. And there we go, frequency multiplier, display enable or disable, CMOS clear normal, password disable or enable, and then a reserve switch. And then we have a table, and then it looks like we have another table here. CPU switch table that configures the clock speed the processor runs at. So this would definitely be a probably 94 era motherboard design. And then we have our dip switches here. Obviously that is going to be upside down. And then it looks like we have another modem connection on the motherboard. So you can have two modems by the looks of it. And then we have a couple of slots back here. Probably one of those for a TV tuner card and the other one for potentially a second modem or a second display card. Or second display connection. So, but I like how they give you the option to disable the onboard video. You see setup, disable, or enable. Maybe that turns off the option to get into the system setup. Be a pretty interesting option. Might have to flick that switch and see what happens. Over here we also have our piezoelectric squeaker can. We have another memory module here, so I'm going to guess that these are 4 megabytes each, 4, 8, 12, 16. And it looks like these are in fact installed in matched pairs. I don't think anyone's ever been inside the system other than me. Yeah, 5th week of 1995. So if this RAM has been upgraded, it was either upgraded at the factory or very soon after this system was ordered and received. We have a couple LEDs here. We have our power LED, hard disk activity indicator LED, and we have a reset button. And we have connections for those three on the motherboard. And then just past that we have a blurry image. Just past that we have a connection here for a fan that would definitely be required if you're running a 100 megahertz Pentium processor in this thing. And that is mounted inside this this riser card cage thing, not riser card cage. It's got guide rails, a riser card guide rail bracket. It's got a fan in here. That would be an AVC fan. No, just AV. Avant-garde. Okay, I haven't ever had the system on, so I haven't heard that thing run. And it looks like there was an option there for a little business audio speaker, but obviously one never made it into the system. So, speaking of ways in which Packard Bell cheaps out, so we have our IDE cable here. I think that may be a part number or a number of feet indicator here, 70,096 feet. I don't think that is a date code from 1996. None of the part numbers I'm seeing, well, none of the date codes I'm seeing date this thing to any newer than probably about the first month of 1995, January 1995 or thereabouts. So then up here we have our optical drive. I think the optical and floppy drives have to come out through the front of the computer. And let me see, are there any provisions to get the front panel off this thing? It looks like there could be. Looks like the optical drive comes out. A couple screws here. There's probably going to be a couple screws on the other side of the system. So the other side of the case does come off. There's not much you can do back there. But I will go ahead and take that side of the case. We'll go ahead and take that side of the case off. So it looks like to do that, we need to tip the system up on its end. We need to tip the system upside down once again. After adjusting the tripod. So we will tip the system upside down. There are a pair of screws, one here and one here, that need to be taken out. And then once we get those screws out, this side of the case should come free. Which it does, lifts up and away. And I tell you what, these are some very well built side panels. And we can see the back side of the motherboard. We can see a screw that I think helps hold the power supply cage into the system. And then we can see two more screws that hold the optical drive in. And then we've got two screws right here that looks like they hold what I would call the motherboard tray into the system. So it looks like this motherboard is on a tray that you can take out of the case separately to give you plenty of access to the system board, or motherboard, depending on whatever you want to call it. And then I don't believe I'm going to fully disassemble this system at this time. Might do so later, because this is the first time I've had this system, first or second time I've had this system this far apart. what it looks like to get the power supply out. There is a mounting bracket that has to come out, and that mounting bracket is secured on one side or the other. No, this screw right here, I'm not even pointing at that, am I? No, this screw right over here also helps hold that motherboard tray in place. So, and then got 2 more screws for the CD drive. Probably a CD-ROM drive if I had to guess. So, but yeah, that's just about it as far as a detailed physical overview goes, other than actually disassembling the system. Yes, other than actually getting the motherboard out of the system, something that I am not interested in doing at the moment. Now, despite all the dust that the power supply appears to have collected, the system itself is not that bad inside. However, the case plastics have yellowed quite a bit. The camera's not making it out very well. Could try to, there we go, scrounge up my OS2 box, which is very definitely white. That definitely shows the yellowing off a bit better. Not as good as I'd like, but can't have everything. So, let's see. Can I get this thing back together on camera? The hot new game show from TCG Productions. So, I'm going to go ahead and put this thing back together. And I even think I'll go ahead and put a hard drive back in this system. No, that's definitely not the correct screw. Told you Packard Bell was playing a little bit fast and loose with screw sizes. Now in a later video I might take this system completely apart. Once I've had a round or two of practice doing that off camera. So to put a hard drive in this system, obviously you need a hard drive and you need four screws. And I'm back. Found the 4th screw I wanted. So, anyways, to put a hard drive in one of these systems, just a matter of taking the drive in question. In this case, it's this 850 megabyte Maxtor drive, and slide it into the hard drive cage. You want to make sure that you line the drive up properly. So that way the screw holes line up where you expect them to. And then it's just a matter of taking 4 screws and putting them into the hard drive cage. Well, screwing them into your hard drive to secure it into the hard drive cage. Okay, got the hard drive mounted up, and this is what I mean by these anodized blue screws. You can see they've got a nice blue tint to them. And I didn't have the hard drive lined up correctly in the tray, so I have to leave it hanging proud a little bit on the front, and then use the middle and rear mounting screws on the drive's casing. And it looks like this system can accept up to 2 hard drives. There we go, standard 50-pin IDE, yeah, not 50-pin, 40-pin IDE, and then a notable departure from the usual here, we have an upside-down Molex connector. So this is something to pay attention to with these older systems and this older hardware. This is an upside-down Molex connector. If you try forcing a Molex connector in right side up, you will fry this hard drive. You will let the magic smoke out of it. So you want to pay attention whenever you're working with this older hardware. So now what I'll do is I'll go ahead, I'll put this back in here, make sure that all 4 mounting lugs, all 4 of those mounting tabs line up with the slots in the 5¼ inch expansion cage. And as we can see, it's currently resting in there. A little push and it drops into place just like that. So, go ahead and screw that down. And then I'll go ahead and connect the IDE cable. And speaking of ways in which Packard Bell kind of cheaped out on things here, you'll notice that this IDE cable, it has the pin 1 marker on this side here, but if you notice, it does not have the locating tab to indicate which side of the connector should be up. And that means we have to look at our hard drive here to find out what side is pin 1 and what side is pin 40. As we can see, pin 40 is on the bottom side, what we would call the bottom side of the drive. If the system was standing up, we would be referring to it as the left side of the drive. So pin 40 is going to be on the left side of the drive, which means pin 1 is going to be up on the right side of the drive. So pin 1 is going to be on the right side of the drive, and so this red line here is pin 1. You match the two up and plug the cable in. And now is where we begin our special handling as regards to electrical power on this system. Because this system is from unknown origin and of unknown provenance, I am not only am I not going to connect this hard drive to power right now, I am actually going to disconnect the power from everything else in this system. So this Molex power connector that you can barely see leading to the optical drive, I'm going to disconnect that. I'm going to disconnect the power connector to the floppy drive, and most importantly, I'm going to come down here and disconnect both power connectors leading to the motherboard. There's one and there's the other. So now we are fully disconnected from power. So should this power supply fail the smoke test, it will not damage or destroy anything in this system other than itself. And in fact, we are going to do that now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this system sideways, grab my very long, very thick power cord, hang it on the shelf. I'm going to verify that the system power switch is off. I'm going to verify that the system power switch is off. You can see it a little bit better if I bump the exposure down. Right here, that's the system power switch. This is a hard power switch. This directly switches incoming AC line power to the power supply. So when this switch is off, there is no power going to the power supply. If the switch is on, the power supply is getting power and presumably running the system. So that is on. You'll notice that I can push this button in a fair ways before I meet resistance from the internal mechanism. And that is off. You'll notice that I can push this button in a fraction of its distance, a fraction of that distance before I meet resistance from the internal mechanism. So I'm going to verify that that button is off. I'm going to get myself into a position here where if there is a serious enough fault with this system that the power supply fails the smoke test, before I even turn the power switch on, I can readily shut down. I can readily shut my workbench power off with this conveniently located power strip that you can't see at the moment. And I'm going to plug the power cord in. Alright, the power cord has been plugged in. Nothing has happened, of course. And so, we are going to have ourselves a smoke test. And we have a lawnmower. Okay, you may have been able to see the lights briefly dim. but I think you're definitely going to be able to hear. We have a power supply. It has a lawnmower for a cooling fan. You'll notice that it took several seconds after I turned the power switch off for the power supply to shut down. That is because the power supply is completely unloaded, because there is no load on the supply, because I have everything disconnected from it. So, we have passed the smoke test. We are ready to continue assembling this system. So, I'm going to turn the case back around, plug the the connectors back in, and so as I said before, black to black, you'll be back. Red to red, motherboard dead. And you want to make sure that you're not off by one pin to the left or right over here. Both of these connectors should be seated inside the connector housing. They should be seated completely inside of the header on the motherboard. If you are connected if you have black butted up against black, but you are off by one pin to the left or right, stop immediately and correct that problem. Because otherwise you will let the smoke out of the motherboard, and possibly even a power supply if you get terribly unlucky. So, I'm going to plug in the optical drive. I'm going to plug in the floppy drive. I'm going to plug in the hard drive, taking care to note that we have an upside down Molex power connector on this drive. So, this is right side up, this is upside down. This is how this needs to be plugged into this particular hard drive. It should not feel like you're trying to force the connector in. So, just double checking, both of these are upside down. And if you really want to be safe about it, you'll notice that the silk screening on the hard drive here lists not only 5 volts and 12 volts, but also the ground connections. So, an explanation of the color coding on these wires: red is going to be 5 volts, your black wires are going to be ground, and your yellow is going to be 12 volts. These should match up just like this. If you're not sure if the connector is installed the right way around or not, look at the silk screening on the hard drive's circuit board and look at the wire colors. If 5 volts here is not connected to red here, and 12 volts is not connected to yellow, you have the connector in upside down. Do not power the system on. Do not continue assembly until you correct this problem. Otherwise, you are going to let the smoke out of a hard drive. So now that we have our hard drive plugged in, wrap this. What I'm going to tuck that back in behind IDE cable, and then I'm going to take our expansion card riser board, and look at how those gold pins reflects in the room lighting. I want to take our our expansion card riser board, and plug this back in. Just like so. And then we've got a couple things left to do. There is this bracket here that needs to be slotted in. I know you can't see this. There we go. That slots in just like that. That goes over there just like that. And then I'll come around back here, line this up, and set that into place. Just move it around a little bit to verify everything is installed as it should be. I will press against this as if I were installing an expansion card to verify that that is properly seated into place, which it certainly appears to be. So I'll go ahead and drop the screw on the motherboard. So I'll go ahead and take this, screw that down into place. And just like that, we have a fully assembled system. Almost. Well, we have to put the... No, we don't have a fully assembled system. What am I thinking? We need to reinstall our combination modem and sound card, and then we need to put the side of the case back on. Something that is especially important given that we have a 100 megahertz Pentium processor with active cooling installed in this system. So, spin this around, and this card was installed in the only slot here that has an open expansion slot blank. Well, has an open expansion slot bracket back here. Take this, slide it down into place, and then click that into place just like so. And why is this not sitting? Oh. I did not seat the expansion card riser back into the system fully. Okay, got the system put back together now. The brace or bracket that helps secure the expansion card riser into place actually fits around the end, the far end of that riser card, to secure it in place, not only whenever you're installing an expansion card, but also whenever you're removing an expansion card. So, yeah. Now, you'll notice that there's these gray plastic panels along the bottom of the sides of the computer, except the back. These can be removed and replaced with different color panel kits. And as we can see here, the plastic molds show that this was, let me see, 01/12/94. I am going to take a guess and say that this is December 1st, 1994 is whenever this particular panel was molded. So yeah, this would have been an early 1990. This definitely would have been an early 1995 built system, which means we may have the initial production run of these Pentium systems. Now these panels, they come off okay, but as we can see here, it sometimes takes some cajoling to get them to go back on properly. And yes, you do occasionally have to get physical with these panels. This one in particular is really not wanting to go back on. Try to not break the thing, that would be unfortunate. Okay. I think that'll do it for now. But yeah, these panel kits, they have different colors for these things. You know what, I am not going to tempt fate by attempting to remove the one for the front panel. What I'm going to do instead, I'm going to put this thing right side up And then we'll have a look at the various ports and whatnot on one of these systems. So the first thing you'll notice is, again, it's very yellowed. Now the camera's definitely telling the tale. But you'll also notice that the port colors that are in use here are definitely not standard. They're using Packard Bell was using their own color scheme. Eventually Microsoft would throw around their weight in the industry and dictate that computer manufacturers had to use various standardized port colors for things, such as not yellow for RS-232 serial. Let me see, I believe that would be a teal green color for RS-232 serial, purple for parallel. They did get the keyboard and mouse ports right. And then VGA here would be blue. Our game and MIDI port would be yellow, and then line out would be green. Line out would be green. Mic in would be pink, and line in would be blue. And then there's no standard. I don't think there's much of a standardized color for the modem connection. I've seen green. I've seen gray. But as you see here, there is no Ethernet adapter to be found on this system. The only means of internet connectivity was either through an external modem on the serial port, the internal modem, or some kind of a I'm going to guess some kind of a parallel port device that would presumably allow this thing to access an Ethernet network. So our power supply here, we've got this little plastic grate integrated into the rear. Got this little plastic grate integrated into the rear case plastics, and then you're barely able to see it there, but that is the 120 240 volt voltage selection switch, and it is presently set to 115 volts. And then those are those two slots where you could have an extra modem or a TV tuner card. And then the other one, and then if I remember correctly, the other one was for it looked like it was for a second video connector. So let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and get this thing hooked up. We are going to be using a PS2 mouse. If for some reason that doesn't work, I will plug in that Microsoft serial mouse into the system serial port. And then we will power this thing up and see just what this thing does. The only thing I'm not going to hook up is Ethernet, and that is because, well, the system doesn't have an Ethernet adapter to hook up to. Okay, I've got the room lighting adjusted and the camera repositioned. Alright, there we go. Now our room lighting adjustment is complete. Moved a little Christmas tree angel on top of a lamp, so that way it doesn't glare as bad on the monitor. I think I've got the camera set up appropriately. We're about to find out, though. We're also about to find out if this thing actually works or not, and maybe see if we can also get a free disc out of the optical drive. So we are going to have a smoke test 2.0 in 3, 2, 1. Here we go. Fire and hold. Oh, there we go. Press F1 if you want to run setup. We have 16 megabytes of RAM, max store 7850 AR hard disk. CMOS battery failed, memory size decreased. Okay, I don't know what this thing originally thought it had, but 16 megabytes is what was detected. I'll press F1 for setup. And it's gone back to January 1st, 1990. Let's see if this BIOS has options to do various things like change the color scheme. Okay, no, it does not look like we have those options. Knock the exposure down a notch. And maybe see if we can adjust the focus into some bit of plausibility. Set it to January 4th. My quarterback here that I had one corner of this keyboard on so it wouldn't rock on this very bent and deformed table. 04. A type? Huh. Okay. Let's just type in using the number row. We'll type in 1998 because that is 28 years ago. And for the system time, we'll type in 22:39. And that is correct. We have a Maxtor 7850 AR hard disk. IDE translation mode auto detected. Multiple sector setting and fast programmed I/O. I think we'll just leave those alone. We don't have any other hard drives. You see, boot from the floppy first and then C. Okay. Cache enabled. Booting with turbo on. Numlock on. Okay, that all looks sane enough. EGA VGA video mode. We have a mouse. 640K base and 15360K extended. Let's have a look at our peripheral configuration. Let's do auto. Parallel port mode is set to compatible. And looks like we don't have any options to set the IRQs. So yeah, so so it's PCI IDE controller and probably a PCI video controller. Base memory size 640. ISA LFB size. I'm not sure what that is. Selects the size of the LFB. The base of this memory reported to the operating system. Yeah, that still doesn't help me. 66 latency timer. Burst is enabled. And yeah, that doesn't surprise me that we have FPM sims in bank 0 and EDO sims in bank 1. So maybe someone else has been in this computer messing around with the memory configuration before me. As power management is disabled by default. We'll leave that disabled. Yeah, plug and pray configuration. We can either configure it using the system setup utility, or we can configure it in software using ICU. I think this stands for Intel configuration something or another. And then we can either boot. We have the option to select whether or not we're booting with a plug and play ready operating system. So we'll go ahead and save our changes and exit setup. CMOS battery failed. Press escape to boot. Easy drive. Easy drive. Okay. I'm going to take it that's something resident in the system BIOS. I would like to get into that status. I would like to get into that status screen though. I guess having a dead CMOS battery is helpful because it kind of gives us a pause here. There we go. Easy Drive 8.01W, copyright 1996, Micro House International. So, I don't know if this is this something resident in the system BIOS? Or is this something that has been left behind on the hard drive in a host protected area type configuration? Either way, we don't have really anything to boot. We don't really have anything to boot from. I suppose. Start up. 1, 2, 3. I suppose we could at least give this thing a base install of MS-DOS, see if the floppy drive works. Insert boot disk and hit enter. Alright, I'm going to hold the shift key down to bypass all the startup files. Okay, so we do have a working floppy diskette drive in this system. The MS-DOS boot disk that I have here is currently set up for kickstarting my Gateway 2000 system from an MS-DOS boot diskette. So I'll go ahead and put the installation disk 1 into the drive. And I'm just going to show partition information. We have a active non-DOS partition on the disk. Okay, that is strange. Thought I wiped this drive. Yeah, I think I actually have in fact wiped this hard drive. Who knows, maybe I created a Linux partition on here for reasons unbeknownst to me. Reasons unknown. Oh, reasons unknown, except setup will now perform a minimal installation of MS-DOS 6.22 on a floppy disk. Label the disk as follows. I already have it on here. I already have my startup diskette. Let's see if we get a free CD. The optical drive is comatose. And the emergency ejection mechanism is either not present or it is seized up solid. So maybe this optical drive has had a severe internal failure. Either way, the optical drive is inoperative. I'm just going to go ahead and kick out to MS-DOS. See if we have any setup options here. The floppy drive sounds a little bit crunchy. There's no operating system. Oh, okay. Well, today, boys and girls, we're going to learn how to bypass this screen. So I've got my DOS setup 1 diskette. I'm going to hold the shift key down to bypass all startup files. And then I'm going to go ahead and launch the setup. I'm going to go ahead and launch the FDisk program. And so what we're going to do here is I'm going to format the C drive. C format, C, and then I'm going to specify U for an unconditional. Well, we're going to try a quick format first, and then I'm going to give it the S. I'm going to specify the S switch to the format command, and this will copy system files and a boot sector to the hard disk. Okay, so we need to go into F-disk here, get rid of this non-DOS partition. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take option 3, delete a partition. I want to delete a non-DOS partition. And yes, I wish to continue. Going to create a primary DOS partition. I'm going to display the partition information. Huh, that is weird. Is that... I wonder if that drive overlay software is playing funny tricks here. Delete a non-DOS partition. No partitions defined. And I'm going to create a primary DOS partition. I'm going to tell it yes. Do a quick format and copy system files. No partitions defined. Okay, create. Yes. Yeah, system will now restart again. Here we go. All data on non-removable disk drive C will be lost. And it looks like we're going to do an unconditional format. Okay, format is completed. Volume label. So we have 852 megabytes available on disk. So I'm going to run the sysc command to copy the MS-DOS system files and a boot sector to the C drive. And now we have a message here that says system transferred. And so now, if I reboot the system, you can see at the top it says AMI BIOS copyright 1992. So the BIOS core goes back to 1992. Nope, I didn't want that. Press it. Exit discarding. Oh, okay. Looks like we have near enough to permanent amnesia with a dead CMOS battery. Fortunately, it's a CR2032, and I've got a number of those kicking around. And, yep, starting MS-DOS. Current date is 01/04/1998. Time is 11:01 p.m. So yeah, we just have a boot sector and a command.com and a command interpreter on the hard disk. And that's all we need for this upgrade version of MS-DOS to do anything useful. because as we saw before, it didn't detect. It did not detect an existing install of MS-DOS, and therefore it refused to do anything. But now that we have partitioned and formatted the hard drive and transferred a command interpreter and boot sector over to the hard drive, once we get in the system setup, we should be able to install MS-DOS just like usual. Setup is checking your system configuration. Welcome to setup. So I'm going to hit enter. Setup has found DOS files on your hard disk. We will continue setup. It is not January 1st, 1990. It is 01/04/98, and the system time is 23:02. Yeah, so this system has permanent amnesia as concerns. There we go. As concerns its system settings. And that's one of those ways, and that's probably another way in which Packard Bell cut corners, is by making the power from the system, making the system's power supply unable to retain the CMOS settings even on a warm reset. Okay, looks like our MS-DOS install is complete. There we go. Yeah, it's a lot of files. So, yeah. And just to be really sure, we'll shut the system off and power it back on and see what happens. Notice how the power supply shut down pretty much immediately. The hard drive is nice and quiet in there. Doesn't sound too bad either. So, yeah, there we go. I think that'll just about do it for now. So we've had a look inside the computer, pretty detailed look inside the computer. Powered it up, it passed a smoke test. We installed MS-DOS and got the thing to boot up to an operating system from a cold boot. So, anyways, I think that will just about do it for us. So anyways, this is TCG Productions. Peace out, guys. Peace out. And I'll see y'all in the next one.